Cans it up, the Penguins were changing. They're able to come out relatively easy. Here's Keith Primo with the first. Primo cuts the inside, scores! There it is! Keith Primo! The much maligned center of the Philadelphia Flyers wins this game in the fifth overtime.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 75. We're back. I'm your host, Isaiah.
I'm Dan the Flyer fan.
And I'm Chef B.
Yes, folks, we're all back for another show. Things are kind of crazy out there, as we all know, and we're going to try and help you kind of put that stuff aside for a little bit and concentrate on the NHL and Flyers hockey as we do here at the O&B Puckcast. And tonight we have a special guest from Brotherly Puck, and he's one of their prospect specialists, but he does a lot more than that. And his name is Manny Benevides.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Excellent pronunciation of the name, by the way. First time out. Great job. We're under a heat advisory up here in Toronto area, so talking some puck and some ice hockey would be really welcome right now because it's really boring. The world sucks without sports. Let's get some stuff back here.
Absolutely. Yeah, Manny, you're a frequent contributor there, and I really look forward to your articles.
It's really great to be on the O&B Puckcast. It's a must listen every week for me. So
yeah, well, thanks for doing this. So everybody, we just briefly want to mention, without dwelling on it, 10 years ago today, something kind of happened. Chef, something kind of sort of happened that was maybe a little important 10 years ago today. What was that, Chef?
Yeah, it was the loss, unfortunately, but they're actually playing them on, I don't know if anybody else noticed, it's on CSN right now. I was watching game 1 before I came in here for the show, and game 3 is next, and then I think game 6 is at 9 or 10 or starts like that. I don't know if I have the heart to watch that again.
Well, I would just watch the games that the Flyers win and feel satisfied. Dan, what are your thoughts on this 10-year anniversary of Roy Halladay's perfect game?
Yeah. I probably some of my earliest, really devastation from sports. I believe I would have been about 13, so it's 7th, 8th grade at the time. And, it's I remember that very vividly, and it's hard to believe it's been 10 years.
Yeah. Manny, besides Halladay's perfect game, we're talking about, obviously, the Flyers losing the Stanley Cup in Game 6 to the Chicago Blackhawks. What do you remember? Were you even a Flyers fan at that time?
Oh, absolutely. Been with the Flyers since they got Lindros. Never looked back, and yeah, I mean, it was heartbreaking. I mean, the magical run, though. I mean, with Leighton in net, for crying out loud, and we got all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Chicago was just so deep and so much better, and ultimately they were the better team. History shows that. They won 3 cups. But it was worse because, one of my buddies, Tom, he's a big Chicago Blackhawks fan, and we were kind of, snipping at each other about who was going to win. And then that Kane goal was like a 2x4 upside the head because you don't even know that it was going in. And Kane was running around, like, throwing all of his equipment off, and we were all just kind of watching going like, what just happened? Because nobody even knew. That was the crazy part of it. That's really the only thing that I remember was the bewilderment of seeing that puck go in the net. Actually, not even seeing it go in the net, but realizing that it did go in and ending the season.
Yeah, I think that there are some people recalling a John LeClair goal where it went through the side of the net. Was that versus Buffalo or something?
Yep.
And they were hoping it was that kind of scenario. And then there were other people that were blaming Timo Timonen for letting Kane get that shot off. I'm like, that's the kind of shot you kind of want him to take. That's, the routine as you can get. But it's in the back of the net in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, it just drives me nuts that everybody on Twitter today Twitter has been such a terrible place for the last few weeks anyways, or since the COVID started. But really everybody today is like, well, apparently, I don't know, something might have happened 10 years ago. Don't know what. And it's like, guys, come on. Just man up and acknowledge it. We lost. It's okay.
We lost.
We'll get there again.
Yeah, we will. And I knew it was in. He's not, an NHL player isn't going to start hopping around, like a jackass unless something is. He knows that sucker was in. It's okay, like you said. The Chicago was the real deal. They were deep. That was a fantastic team. Their only weakness was a net. And looking back at it, Niemi and Leighton were kind of even, except that Niemi made momentum saves and Leighton couldn't. And the Lightning was just kind of out of the bottle for Leighton at that juncture in the playoffs where he was really good earlier. He wasn't very good, and Chicago exposed that. So, in other developments since we last joined you, gentlemen, the Flyers signed Linus Hogberg. We will discuss him as we go through our prospect review. Oscar Lindblom was named the Flyers nominee for the Masterton Trophy. And here's something I want to kind of panel a little bit. And Dan, let me go to you first. The NHL will reseed the teams in the tournament and go with the best of 7 series after the qualifying round, as opposed to going with a bracket. The reason I like that better is it rewards the teams for the regular season that they played instead of putting them into a tournament that seemingly has nothing to do with what they accomplished. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's the right move. I believe it's goes back to the system in place before the new divisions and alignments were made. So I believe it's good. And in this system, it's best to try anything new, right? If they want to try something different, this is the year to do it. And, if it works, it works, and it may help moving forward if they, decide to change something for next season.
Yep. That Chef?
Yeah, I like it. I think it for exactly the same reasons you said. It's preserves kind of sort of what you did in the regular season. I always liked that reseeding better anyway. That's kind of what we grew up on. For a while there, well, the meat of it anyway for me. So, yeah, that's where I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, brackets are fun for betting, but, particularly in this scenario where a lot of teams felt shortchanged as it was, I thought it was the best setup for this special scenario. Manny?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing, too, is you want the seeded teams to take their games against each other seriously. You want it to mean something. You want something to be on the line, whether it's a 1 seed, throughout the conference up until the Stanley Cup final, if and when that takes place. But you want, Tampa, Boston, Washington, and Philly in the East. You want their games to mean something. You don't want it to be, an exhibition game where, if you win, great. If you lose, who cares? The Flyers are in a nice position where they can't go any worse than 4, and they're really coming in as the 4 anyway, so they only have room to improve. So it's something for them to actually really sort of grab hold of and hopefully get some momentum right off the bat when this thing starts.
Yeah, you don't want it to be like 3 games or like the Swiss national game or something. Who needs that? Boy, that was depressing. Does anybody remember that ever happened? Right?
Lausanne.
Yeah, Lausanne. Right. A little pregnant pause there, so nobody obviously does. But it was a long time ago. So anyway, the NHL announced that they're entering the phase 2 of their protocol, which was a return to play. Actually started yesterday officially that 31 clubs will be allowed to open their training facilities for small group practices according to local and municipal protocols, health protocols, and so forth. So a maximum of 6 players can train together at any time on a voluntary basis. Although Pierre LeBrun noted that not all the clubs will be in a position to play right away. And then there are issues with the players that need to go through a quarantine. So this is all going to be kind of playing out, and hopefully they'll figure out some kind of regimen. And of course the Flyers have their own player who has a little bit of an advantage that we talked about last time. Manny, might as well just mention this with you, with the crazy Iron Man, Ivan Provorov, who has had access to a rink this whole time and is kind of slacking off a little bit with only 6 hours a day of training.
Yeah, I know. Is he trying to come back for the Stanley Cup playoffs, or is he trying to go for Mr. Universe? What's he doing here? It's making everybody look bad with his training regimen, but good for him. He's I expect nothing less from him. He's when he had that playoff game where he was basically playing with one shoulder, and afterwards, I think it was like 2-3 days after, he did a picture of himself skating at center ice alone by himself, saying, you know what, with the caption, we will be back next year. Like, no one's more disappointed than me. That tells you everything you need to know about Ivan Provorov. He is a Terminator. He's a Timex. He takes a lick and he keeps on ticking. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm just hoping, as I heard somewhere else, that I think Jack from High and Wide was talking about it, that AV's got to keep an eye on this guy. We don't want him burning out on training. And, it's great that he has that reserve, but the Flyers have a lot of talent on defense right now, and make sure that he doesn't overdo it, if you will. So anyway, Phase 3, which will be opening training camps, is expected to be implemented in July if all goes well. There was a recent announcement that asymptomatic spread of this disease is rare, according to World Health Organization, for what that is worth. That augurs well for players that do test positive, that maybe tilts things more in a positive direction, that, if a couple of players come down with this thing, or at least test positive, that it might not be something that'll shut the whole team down. But we'll just have to wait and see about that. But moving along, the hub cities issue is one that seems to be clarifying. At least we talked about it last time with Russ, Dan. It looks like Vegas has got to be one of them. But I'm hearing a couple of different things about what could be that other city. I've heard a couple references to Columbus or Pittsburgh, and then also I've heard that Toronto has got to be the other location. And Manny, feel free to chime in on this if you're hearing anything where you're at.
Yeah, I heard it was Vegas and one of Pittsburgh and Columbus. I would assume they would want to do it in Toronto, but last I heard, and Manny can clarify, they had that city locked down pretty tight for most of the summer, if I remember correctly. So I don't know what's going on further here, but that definitely is going to be, I think, the biggest hurdle, is locking down the cities and locking down the proper hotels and spaces and personnel and everything they need to do here. And I talked about this on my show last week. I do not envy the people that are in charge of this. The logistical side has to be a nightmare to work on right now.
Yeah.
Chef, why don't you get in there?
Yeah, I'm going to assume, probably, I know on one of our past shows, Minneapolis was brought up because of the training. I'm going to say that's probably off the table now, the condition of that city. So I'm thinking they're probably not going to want these guys to travel so far. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was a West Coast situation. That way, then if they can reasonably be close together and maybe not, I guess, expose them to as much travel as they would have to. I don't know. As of right now, I know Vegas has definitely got to be one, but the other one is up in the air, and I think they'll focus around how its proximity to Vegas.
Yeah, I would imagine Vegas would be almost a lock. They just have the infrastructure there, and they can make a pretty good attempt at keeping the players and their families sort of somewhat contained within the resorts there, especially if they're off the strip. But I mean, I really do think that the league really wants Toronto bad, and I mean, it's the center of the hockey universe. The CBC, Sportsnet, TSN, they're all headquartered there. They're within 5 minutes of the Scotiabank Arena. They've all the hotels downtown. They've already canceled every major event in the summer, essentially. So they're going to want to try to recoup some of that, I'm sure. I just don't know if the city is going to be ready to commit to something like that. Certainly not yet. Ontario, our province, is basically still going to be another 2 weeks, I think they said. I think they said the 16th. Actually, that's not even 2 weeks. I think it's next week or end of next week. So the 16th, and then they're going to open up to another phase, kind of like what the NHL is doing. But it's pretty much going to be everywhere in the province except for the Greater Toronto area, which would include my region here just outside of Toronto. So there's still some ways to go. I think the league wants Canada. I know that there's the quarantining situation, but it's a political football too. I mean, Vancouver is a big city too, and they're certainly a lot more prepared out there right now to deal with handling 12 teams in a tournament. And Edmonton also really seems interested to want to do this as well. If Toronto gets it, you can expect a lot of hate from the rest of Canada that, oh good, Toronto gets it again. Toronto's like the New York City of Canada. Like every other city hates Toronto, except if you're in Toronto, then you love Toronto, right? So.
Right. Well, the other issues there is like how many other rinks are they going to have available in the area, and because the teams are going to need to practice, and there's all kinds of issues. But regardless of how it shakes out, the training camps won't open before July 10th. And then if everything goes well, of course, this is a step-by-step process, then the implementation of Phase 4 resuming play can occur at the earliest in late July, at maybe a target date of August the 1st, in that range. And that's what we know now. Yeah, obviously you're going to see the reporters with video of players skating, and that'll be another indication that things are moving along. So one thing I did also want to refer to or talk about, gents, was this article came out in Denver and was discussed also in other places, Dan, about the NHL kind of realigning their schedule and starting later now. And the idea behind that would be stop competing against the NFL and the NBA as much, and kind of have that open space where they're going to be playing into, I guess it would be August, to decide the Stanley Cup. And I've heard various takes on this, and I wanted to get yours.
Yeah, I've heard a whole lot of arguments on this going all kinds of directions over the last few weeks. And I mean, I understand it from a rating standpoint. You kind of let the NFL finish, in the fall, and then you get late summer all to yourself after the NBA wraps up. So in that sense, it does make sense, for the Cup finals and such for TV ratings. But, I guess it depends on how long this year runs, this playoff runs, and how quickly they can get it done. And if there's no need to push back next season too far, then maybe they won't. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe starting in late November, December would be a interesting thing to try for a year. See if it works, and if not, then they can always move back. But yeah, I've heard a lot of different conversation about this over the past couple of weeks.
Chef?
Definitely think from a money standpoint, they're not going to want to wait too long. I know, with all the issues that they're going to have to take in pay cuts, CBA, all that, all the monetary issues. So what I think is they'll probably start this year, probably like Dan said, December, late November. They're going to maybe try to get it in as much as they can, as fast as they can. And if it happens to work out, it works out. And if they want to push it, then they can tweak it from there. But I tend to think that that's the route they're going to take. They're not going to want to lose out in too much money. They want to get as much money flowing back into the sport as they can.
Sure. Manny, what's your take on that? For me, it's kind of, this is a trial balloon. This is like due to the circumstances, they could have the attitude, let's see what this looks like and be open to a change without making any kind of real commitment.
Yeah, that's true. And I understand, like, from Chef and Dan's points of view there with getting as much revenue back, for the sport and everything. And I get that. But at the same time, I hate this idea. The only people that are in favor of this idea, I mean, listen, if it's 1 year, I can swallow that. I can handle that. If it goes beyond this and we're doing summer hockey every single year, this is going to be bad. I mean, listen, Canadians are just getting out of their igloos in June. You know what I mean? Like, we want to go out fishing and we want to go out and enjoy the outdoors because we're hemmed inside of our homes, the entire winter months. And I just don't think it makes sense. I don't think the players want it. I think they appreciate the summers off. Their kids won't be in school. They get to spend time with their kids and their family, and they get to do stuff. The only people that would be in favor of this would be the NHL owners and the upper management and the commissioner's office. I really don't see the appeal for this at all. And I understand getting away from football and basketball, and they kind of want to pounce on, Major League Baseball's kind of taking a beating right now. And I think that they're trying to be opportunistic and jump on that opportunity. But I think that they should actually start the season earlier, and it makes more sense to start September, right after the Labor Day weekend. You want to do something in the summer, do your training camps in August and get ready for right away for September. And you got 2 months where you don't have to compete with the NBA. Why the NBA doesn't go into the summer is beyond me. Players don't really want to come to the Raptors because of the winter up here, and that's a big drawback. I don't understand why basketball doesn't play in the summer. Like, they just slam dunk, pun in, for the NBA. I don't know why they don't take advantage of that.
I agree completely with that. To me, that's the obvious move. The NBA is the league that should exploit the obtuseness of the idiots that run Major League Baseball. So yeah, no argument from me there.
And then, sorry to jump in, but then this is a negotiating ploy in the CBA for me. This is what the NHL is doing. And basically, I mean, they know that the players are going to want to go to the Olympics. They know that they're going to want some sort of hockey-related revenue from a World Cup of hockey or a Canada Cup or whatever you want to call it, some sort of international tournament. How are they going to negotiate that? How are these guys going to play this if you start the season throughout the summer? Like, when does it take place? You're not going to break in February to go to the Olympics. Like, it seems like this idea is out there just to kind of, I don't know, see what the reaction is going to be from the players' side. And it's kind of a strange thing to do at a time like this to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be a trial balloon like, we've all kind of hinted at. But it's funny you brought up the CBA extension, because listening to Jason Martinez, our good buddy, was on a couple shows ago, and he was talking with Bill Meltzer, and they seem to think that the environment is just ripe for a CBA extension. Now is not the time for labor mistrust. Let's get this thing extended and remove an obstacle in the difficult circumstances that they're facing right now. Dan?
Yeah, I I heard that as well. And, as far as just getting everything out of the way now, I think it's the way to go. You're in the middle of this whole issue here, with the uncertainty that lies ahead, may as well face all the uncertainty at once, right? And just get it out of the way. So I don't know if it happens, but it would be an interesting take. Like we said, it's such a trial phase right now that why not give it a try, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the CBA extension it makes too much sense. I don't know. There's really need to be much more comment about that. Yeah, Dan, I just wanted to give you a forum, because it's that time of the show where we have to discuss a monster trade proposal that appeared in Brotherly Puck this week. The feedback was interesting, and you talked about what it would look like for the Flyers to get a premier player like Jack Eichel in terms of cost and everything else. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. Essentially proposed a trade, and there was rumors of him being unhappy. He did an interview with ESPN and voiced his displeasure, and I read that article and thought, wonder if the Flyers, what would it look like if the Flyers theoretically went after him? And theoretically is the big word here, because I think a vast majority of our audience didn't seem to understand that I wasn't Chuck Fletcher making the trade myself. But it's an interesting case here, and I got feedback from about 10,000 people, I believe was the number at this point, and it's a big proposal. And I think a lot of people play NHL 20 too much, and they gave me, a lot of BS trades. I got somebody wanted Gostisbehere JVR on a first for him, and I laughed in his face, because it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous concept to suggest something like that for Jack Eichel. I think it comes down to an ignorance for who Jack Eichel is and how good he ended up being and how good he can be, and he continues to be, and he's 23, and what the Flyers could give up. And yes, it's a lot, and, I tried to write the piece as the Buffalo Sabres. If I was in charge of the Sabres and I had to trade Jack Eichel to Philadelphia, what would I want in return? And I kind of put that out there, and it's been a long time since I've had that number of Flyers Twitter angry at me. So I just put it out there, and the chance of it actually happening, the chance of Jack Eichel coming to Philadelphia are minimal, to say the least. But, it was supposed to be fun, and it pissed a whole lot of people off.
Very good, very good. Manny, just your feedback on the concept of it and what you think is even worthwhile to look at the Flyers like that with the kind of where they're at in their championship pursuit, the arc of their timeline right now. Is that the kind of move that could put him over the top if you had to give up a player, say, like a Couturier and a Sanheim and a Farabee or something like that?
It would definitely rock the hockey world if a trade like that of that magnitude definitely went down. I think Dan's on the right track where he says, the odds of them trading Eichel anyways to begin with are pretty minimal. I mean, you look at it, the guy's making $10 million a year. He's well compensated. He's under contract for at least the next 6 years. They're paying him good money to just, play hockey. And I know that he's expressed his frustrations. What do you expect him to do? I don't understand what these people expect Jack Eichel to do. Do you expect him to be, doing cartwheels in the streets? What do you want him to do? He's a captain of that team. They've gone nowhere. They've got some nice, young players and prospects. Overall, their general management has been a disaster. They've made some moves that make you scratch your head, like getting Wayne Simmons at the trade deadline. You wonder why. Why are you getting leadership and you're out? You're not making the playoffs. You're not even making a playoffs where it's 24 teams in a tournament. You are one of the 7 worst teams in the NHL. Why did you go out and get Wayne Simmons? What on earth did he do to deserve that fate? Their coaching. When they fired Phil Housley after he had started the season so well, and I know that everything went down the tank, that kind of showed me that they were very reactive and knee-jerky, and I don't think they really have a great plan. I think it's kind of piecemeal, and they're kind of building this thing as they go. Ralph Kruger, the coach of the Sabres, said that he's happy, and it's a good thing that Eichel spoke up, and it shows that he's passionate. And I agree. You got to be. He's the captain. If he doesn't say anything, whiz.
Yeah. And I think you look at a situation, you look at the teams that have won cups, with the exception of, I guess, St. Louis and Carolina. If you bracket it, the first post-lockout team to win a cup and the last one. In between those, there always seemed to be some kind of superstar player. And the Flyers don't really have that player. The analytics might point towards Sean Couturier as being that guy, but I think we all know better than that. He's an elite defensive center. He's not an elite center in the league. So, yeah, I think the chances of it happening are slim and none, but I understand the mindset when you have teams that were led by Kanan Taves and Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar and Malkin Crosby, 3 cups. So it's not a crazy thing because Eichel, if he's not there already, is well on his way to becoming a player of that quality. Chef, any last thoughts before we get to the prospect review?
The only thing I could say is it's funny, like if you looked at all the stuff that people were suggesting, basically it's just getting rid of our fringe players that we don't think aren't worth it anymore, or our garbage, basically cleaning up our garbage. I mean, and sending it over there and thinking, oh, no, they should take this. It's throwing JVR in that trade and Ghost in that trade and thinking that, oh yeah, that's a good thing. They should take that. Well, that's not JVR 3-4 years ago. It's not Ghost when he was in his prime either. They're just higher paychecks, and you need to use those too to actually make room for Eichel's salary. So, and that's the funny thing I think about is we're expecting everybody else to take our garbage when we wouldn't take theirs.
Well, yeah, I mean that's just pure amateur hour, armchair GM, Twitter, hockey IQ in the 50s. There's no way anything like that's going to happen. So it's kind of silly. It takes me back to my hockey buzz days. So there's idiotic stuff. I swear, that's hilarious.
Yeah, you can't win with trades when you post a trade because every Tom, Dick, and Harry's got an opinion. And I remember I just posted a poll that was like, would you trade Gostisbehere and the 26th overall pick to Ottawa for pick 21? And the amount of responses that I got for that, are you crazy? You can get way more for Ghost. And I'm like, okay, I didn't say I would do it. I just put it out there as, do you think that would be a good thing to do? And the most craziest response that I had was, I would rather keep Shane Gostisbehere and have him exactly how he is right now than see him go somewhere and actually succeed. And I'm like, dude, if you really like this player, why on earth would you want to do that to that player? Like, that's silliness.
Yeah.
And I would do that deal. I definitely don't think you can get much better for that. I don't know what that guy was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the Flyers situation is, they're going to need that $4.25 million at some point with the cap space. And I noticed that in the replies that it seemed like Tom and Harry never ever replied, but the other guy always did. So, and we'll leave it at that. And we're so glad here tonight to have Manny because one of the things we have kind of held off on, and we know our last show with Russ Cohen, we were talking about the draft and some of the Flyers' needs, and we did kind of delve into some players. We wanted to run through the system and get Manny's opinion about where these guys are at, what they need to work on, how close they are, and how do they project. And so without any further ado, we're going to start out, Manny, with one Morgan Frost, who I think is unanimously considered the Flyers' best prospect. He obviously is on the come, and he, if he's not going to see action in this truncated season, it is expected that he would make the team next season. But how is he going to do that, and what's he going to need to improve upon?
Yeah, I mean, listen, without a doubt, Morgan Frost is the best player in the system. And even though the Flyers are still, I feel, a top 10 system, I think that they're right around the 10 mark. I think that they have gone down a few spots. And I think in terms of top end talent anyways, it's all on the Flyers for the most part. What you're getting in the system is a lot of depth. And the Flyers are really fortunate at having a lot of depth, but it also means a lot of competition for spots, and there aren't that many spots on the big club coming up next year. I think that with a guy like Frost, I mean, look, the creativity is there, the offensive awareness is there. He thinks the game at a very high level. You know, I never make comparisons to players that are in the NHL now. I don't think that's fair to the young player to put a name beside them. But you can see that, you know, he's got good offensive instincts, and you saw it at times with the Flyers in his 20-game spell. I mean, I know he only got 7 points, but that's not terrible. I think it was more a fact of, you know, you needed him to play in a top 6 role with some premier talent. And then, you know, when he's back on the Phantoms, he kind of dipped a little bit. There's not very much talent that was AHL ready last season. I'm sure Dan can tell you that. You know, 13 goals in the AHL, no, not bad. 29 points in 41 games. The best is yet to come from Morgan Frost, I have no doubt. He does have to work a little bit more in terms of his defensive game. Just making sure he's picking up players, that he's, you know, aware of, you know, what's going on in the defensive zone, picking up coverages, and just always being aware. He does need to add a little bit more bulk and muscle, I feel. But I would expect that at some point next year, as long as there is a spot, it might not be right out of training camp, but I can see. I just said I wasn't going to compare him to a player in the NHL, but a guy like Jordan Kyrou for St. Louis, highly touted goal scorer from the OHL, just like Frost, and then, you know, kind of struggled to make the team at first, went down to San Antonio in the AHL, really played well, and then worked his way up back again for the following season for the big club, and that's where he is now. I see that for Morgan Frost. I think the future is very bright, and yeah, he is the pinnacle of the prospects in our system right now.
I mean, he had a couple really great shots, and he's really nifty. That first goal he scored and some other subsequent goals, but still more of a pass-first guy than a shooter.
Yeah, he's definitely a better playmaker than a shooter. That being said, if he's given time and space, he could do some pretty inventive things with that puck.
Yeah, no question. Dan, just your last impression. I know it's probably something we covered a little bit about what Morgan looked like when he was in the AHL and some of the things that you noticed about him because you watch him so much.
Yeah, it was funny. Kind of, he started to seem to peak right at the end of the season. I believe it was the last game, if not the last game, the second last game before the season went under, that I was watching him and went, that guy looks like a potential superstar. And that was the first time I thought that all season long. I think Manny's absolutely right. His defensive side needs to increase big time. His play away from the puck in general needs to step up a little bit, kind of be that well-rounded player, especially if he's going to find himself in the third line in the NHL. You need to kind of have that two-way ability. But, yeah, I think it's going to take time. I don't know if he makes it out of camp next year. It really depends on more the fate of Nolan Patrick, I think, more than anything, about his roster spot. But yeah, it's definitely there. I think it's just going to take a little more time. He obviously didn't have the immediate impact that people thought he would, but I think in time he will be a good little NHLer.
Okay. Well, next up on my list is defenseman Cam York, first-round draft pick for the Flyers last draft. And he's got some skills that are just pretty amazing. Plays with a amazing calm and efficiency. What else can you tell us about Cam?
Yeah, he had a pretty good season with Michigan. 14th overall first-round pick. I know everyone was I jumped out of my seat thinking it was Cole Caulfield when they announced the U.S. National Development Program when the Flyers made the pick. But I think overall everyone is pleased with York's progression this year. I know that he was hurt for a little bit and that it affected his game at the World Junior Hockey Championship. Really didn't play much at all. I think he 3-4 minute a night kind of guy. But I mean, overall, you can see that he's a good skater. He's got poise. He's got patience. He's able to make that outlet pass tape to tape. He's able to get the puck out of the zone. 16 points in 30 games as a freshman, and he's a defenseman. So I mean, and he was hurt for a lot of the year. I mean, those numbers should go up for next year. And I think that the thing with COVID is, all these players in their junior careers, they were cut short this year. They're not into the playoffs. They're not finishing up their regular seasons. They're missing out on a lot of hockey. And I think that, especially with the guys in the draft this year coming up, a lot of them are going to be going back to junior. I mean, a lot of them will anyways, but I think most of them, for their development's sake, should probably go back to junior, with the possible exception of Lafreniere, and you can still make a case for that too. A guy like York should definitely be playing a much larger role for the U.S. team at the World Juniors next year. And just recent news, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but Sam Carchidi sent out a note that Cam York is definitely expected to turn pro next season. So he will be spending one more year at Michigan, and then away to the Phantoms.
Okay. Yeah, I read the same thing. It's funny you mention him, because part of the piece dealt with the Flyers gambling that the combination of York and Bobby Brink would be greater than had they just drafted Cole Caulfield, who's probably the best scoring winger in the last draft, and the Flyers passed on him twice, and they traded down. And then with the 34th pick overall in round 2, they drafted Bobby Brink, who was at University of Denver, and he had some really good results, at the NCAA level.
Yeah, Brink's got a lot of things in common with Frost in terms of the offensive side. I don't think he's at Frost level. I do think, though, that his future definitely is bright. He had a great year in Denver. I believe he was the freshman of the year with Denver. And again, he played on the U.S. Team at the World Juniors. I think it was a third line player. More will be expected of Bobby Brink this time around. I know that he had some time in the USHL before he went to Denver. And the great little factoid about him is Bob McKenzie talked to his dad, and his dad said, when he was born, they were trying to debate. He loved Bobby Orr and Bobby Clark. So he didn't know what middle name to give Bobby Brink. And eventually they settled on Bobby Orr Brink. So there you go.
Yeah, and it almost was Bobby Clark. That would have been fitting. But 28 games, 11 goals, 24 points. Pretty good freshman year for Bobby Brink. And
and I mean, he fell on his knee awkwardly, and it looked pretty bad, but he wasn't really hurt too badly. And unfortunately, again, the season ended prematurely, and you didn't really get a chance to see what he can do when the games really mattered. He's got good offensive instincts. His head's always up in the zone. He's always looking to make a play, and he's super creative. I don't think he's got he's at quite Frost level, but he's definitely an intriguing guy, that's for sure. And to nab him in the second round, that's a pretty good find.
Yeah, and like Frost, there was a little bit of a controversy about his skating. Frost tended to glide. That was something different. Bobby Brink just has a totally different kind of form, but seems to be able to get around pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to work on it. I mean, skating is something that a lot of young players have to work on, and they're still growing, so their bodies have to adjust while they're growing into their new bodies. But, I mean, I wouldn't call him overly fast, but I certainly wouldn't say that he's slow or even average. He'll be fine. His creativity and his mind definitely makes up for it, for everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So, another player that is a little controversial depending on where you would rank him, but he's certainly in most top 5 rankings, is a lot like Phil Myers in that he was an undrafted free agent. And of course, we're talking about Igor Zamula, who is 6'3", 175. Besides having a back injury, which is somewhat of a concern, everything seemed to go pretty well up until that junior tournament.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he was point per game in Calgary in the Western Hockey League, 28 points, 28 games, 7 goals. He's really tall. I think 6'3" was putting it nicely. He looks a lot bigger. The Hitmen have him listed at 6'4.5", and I think Myers is 6'5".
6'5", yeah.
Sanheim is 6'4". Sanheim is 6'4", so he's kind of in the middle there. It is pretty interesting that Frost and Brink are always and Patrick even are kind of always linked together. Zamula is always being linked with Myers. We've got the two goaltenders, Sandstrom and Kirill Ustimenko are kind of lumped in together too. There's a lot of kind of pairs, and it's leading to a lot of competition. And I think Zamula really surprised a lot of people with just the way that he commands the blue line, especially on the power play. He's always zipping up and down, switching with his defense partner. He loves to shoot. He loves trying to make shooting lanes, trying to make things happen, especially on the power play. And he's got a bit of a mean streak, and he's a very confident young man. He definitely knows that he's a skilled player, and he wants to live up to that size. I think that he needs to put on a little bit more weight. He's listed at 170, and if you're 6'4", that's pretty light, especially if he's going to be making his pro debut with the Phantoms. I can definitely see him in a top 4 role to start. I think that the weight, he's going to need to put on some weight. He's got to be careful with his back. I know at first diagnosed it as a degenerative bone disorder of some kind. They kind of stepped back from that, and they said he's rehabbing fine and he should be good to go. But I mean, when you're 6'4", when you're that big, you're going to be intimidating 17-year-old kids in junior hockey. He's not really going to be able to do that in the AHL. So he's going to have to rely a lot more on his competitive streak and on his skill to get by as he fills in that body. But overall, I mean, look, he's going to be a welcome addition to a Phantom squad that, as we're going to see as we go through these names, they're completely overhauling their back end. And it's actually kind of indicative that this is the kind of the way that Chuck Fletcher is going to go about doing this. I know that Zamula had a great World Junior tournament, and he kind of surprised everybody by putting his name out there on the radar. And to get this guy as an undrafted free agent, I mean, what a find! You can't really get too much better than that.
Yeah, I mean, him and Myers make up for some of the other players that have been drafted that we'll talk about later that haven't really cashed in just yet and may never cash in. So that's good to have those chips there that are kind of like a backup, because the percentage chance of these guys making it is not as good as what we're seeing right now. The Flyers are playing with house money. They have a high percentage of players that look like they're going to be NHL players, and that's to their credit. And the next player we wanted to discuss before I hand this off to Chef, and it's one of his favorite players, of course, is Isaac Ratcliffe, who is found that it's a lot harder at the AHL level after dominating at the CHL level. What can you tell us about what Isaac is going through and his projection?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap really with Zamula. I mean, he's a big boy. He's 6'5". When he was with the Guelph Storm, I mean, the Flyers drafted him. He had 54 points in 67 games. 28 of them were goals. They took him early in the second round. I think they made a trade in order to get him where they got him to 35th overall. And then the following year, he had 41 goals. And then the following year, they had 50. And he was in the leadership group there in Guelph, and they won the Ontario Championship. making the adjustment to the AHL. Even if you are 6'5", there's going to be an adjustment to the game. The speed of the game from junior level to professional level is quite a bit different. And again, he's 6'5". He's not going to be intimidating, guys that are really hungry to try to make the pros and the big leagues. These are not 17, 18-year-old kids anymore. These are vets. These are guys in their 20s or in their 30s that have been around. They've ridden the bus. They've done everything that they've had to do to try to get their breaks in the NHL, and it's a better league. Isaac would be the first one to tell you that his season was not what he had wanted. 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points only in 53 games. But that being said, he sort of looked like he was getting into a rhythm by the end of the season, and he was just looking more confident, and he was anticipating things a little bit better. Just overall, his game was coming around. And then, of course, the break happens, and that kills all the momentum, and he's going to have to, start over again next year. But definitely think those rookie jitters will be out of the way, and especially if he gets a little bit of help up front to play with, you should definitely look for Isaac Ratcliffe to have a better season in year 2 as a pro.
Yep. Yeah, he's going to, probably be more of a leadership role. They've already jettisoned guys like Phil Varone, and who knows whether the Greg Carey types are going to be around with all these young players coming in, depending on who can make the parent club. So, Chef, I'm going to hand it off to you with the next group of prospects and go from there.
All right, German Rubistov. We've talked about in the past how he's been hot and cold, falling into favor, falling out of favor. I think probably a change of GMs was probably the best thing that happened to him, and he was finally getting healthy. What else can you tell us about him?
You know what? For a guy that, Hextall kind of traded down to get because he knew he would be there, for me, this one's kind of a swing and a miss. Pretty disappointed with Rubtsov. I know that injuries have not been kind to him. It's always a shoulder or, a leg injury or something. And he hasn't really had the ability to get a full season in and then build on that full season. It's always, a quarter of a season, and then he gets, a break for, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months. Then he comes back and then he gets hurt again. Like, he's not able to kind of string it all together. Rubtsov, his defensive game seems to be getting better. It's improved, but the problem is that the offense just is not there. And I don't know why that would be the case. There's been some chatter on Twitter over the last couple of weeks that maybe Rubtsov would be better served on the wing. And I don't know. There's people out there saying that he is better on the wing. Where they got it from. He's been center for the entire time that he's been with Lehigh Valley and even in Quebec, in the Quebec League. But he had a 4-game cup of coffee with the Flyers, 0 points. Obviously, that was in a 4th line rule, limited time, limited minutes. But his first year with the Phantoms, 14 games, decimated with injury. He did have 10 points though. Six of them goals. So there was something to build on there, and there was hope. And then this year it's kind of tough to really, throw the book at him because everybody on the Phantoms pretty much was disappointing for the most part. But 42 games, he only scored 2 goals. I mean, for a guy that's a first-round pick, 22nd overall, you kind of want more from this guy. I know that he was involved in some doping scandal with the Russian World Junior team, and I just remember Hextall over and over again saying, you know what, I did my due diligence. He's a good kid. We know what we're going to get with him. We're really happy we got this guy. And you know what, he has yet to piece it together. I mean, I want to see the total package of this guy. Maybe he should go to wing for next year. And see what happens, because the offense, maybe it's just too much responsibility on his shoulders at this level to do, to play a solid, responsible defensive game and chip in offensively. And maybe you can lighten that load a little bit and kind of just loosen the reins a little bit and see if this guy can be a little bit more creative in the offensive zone by moving him to one of the wings.
Okay. Somebody I don't know much about, and maybe you can enlighten us, and Samuel Arison.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of him play. The European players, for me, I always have difficulty figuring out what they're going to be because their game is different, the ice is different, and a lot of times it's 16, 17-year-old kids playing in a men's league against vets. Urson was a nice breath of fresh air, not this past season, but 2 seasons back. He was in the Swedish Junior League, and in 36 games, I mean, he shone like a star. I mean, 27-9 record, 1.95 goals against average, a 933 save percentage. This guy's a 5th-round pick, and he put up numbers like that. Not to mention 5 shutouts. And then, he made the jump to pro in Sweden this year. He plays with Burness. He took a bit of a step back this year. 14 wins, 20 losses in 35 games. It's his first year pro. He's playing against men. He's a 20-year-old. He's going to be working out the kinks of his game as he continues on. He didn't break the 900 save percentage. He had 895 and a 2.9 goals against average. I totally understand why he would take a step back. He's not playing junior level kids anymore. He's playing against men. And I would think that next season, again, you're looking to see if he can build and improve on those numbers and slowly turn Burness into a more competitive team going forward next year.
Okay, another one of my favorites, Wade Allison. I know he's had the injury bug, but he could be the sniper that this team could use. What's your point of view on him?
Yeah, I mean, Wade Allison is, I know he's had the ACL issues before, but, he's played 4 seasons now at Western Michigan. He's kind of a prototypical power forward type guy. He's kind of a sledgehammer. Like, he'll go in there, he'll throw the hits, he'll get into the corners. He's a hardworking player. I like the fact in terms of his character that, he was honest and he admitted that, his knee didn't really feel 100%, but he kept, playing through it and kept working through it. And, he's now a pro. He signed his entry-level deal. He's going to be with the Phantoms. I know that there was a lot of talk about, Allison and Lazinski, making the Flyers as soon as maybe, next season. I don't know about that. I think certainly in Allison's case, I think they want to give his knee a little bit more time, especially that he's, going to be a first-year pro. Certainly, I think physically, he'd be able to handle it. I think we just need to see a little bit more of him. Again, the speed of the game at the pro level. Let's see how he responds. Let's put him with, some guys and see if there's some chemistry there with a guy like Rubtsov or with a guy like Isaac Ratcliffe and kind of, start this transition of the forward core of the Phantoms, just like their defense is going to be undergoing a major shift as well.
Okay. Well, it brings us to a confusing one, in my opinion. Jay O'Brien, he seems like he could be something, then he isn't. What's the real deal on him?
You know what? It's hard to tell what the real deal is with him. He was a high school player, from Thayer Academy. He was a second first-round pick that Ron Hextall made. And, he went off, he committed to NCAA, and he went to play with Providence. Really had a bad year. Even though he started the year well with the World Junior Summer Showcase, and he looked physically like he was going to be a player, really struggled, got injured, had a horror show of a first NCAA season. And I think a lot of Flyer fans kind of said, well, there we go, bust, give up on him. Keep in mind, I think that there's a lot of things in the background with Jay O'Brien and with Thayer Academy. Like, I believe Tony Amonte was the coach at Thayer Academy, and I know that Tristan Amonte was teammates with Jay O'Brien, and he actually followed Jay O'Brien to the Penticton Vs of the BCHL. Jay O'Brien had to take a step back, and he had to say, reevaluate he was going to do. If he was going to change schools, he'd have to be ineligible for NCAA hockey for 1 year. So the only other real alternative was for him to go to a lesser league like the BCHL, which still has some talent. The leading scorer in that league should be a top 10 pick actually next season in next year's draft. But I mean, really, O'Brien, everybody went into this season saying, well, it's a lesser league. Jay O'Brien should be putting up 2 points per game average. And it's kind of like just a blanket statement like that. I don't understand how how people can say something like that. Would you say that a leading scorer in the NHL has to score 120 points? Like what happens if he scores 95? Does that diminish him on his team or as a player? I think it's kind of silly.
So more so it might be just his overall confidence thing.
Yeah, and I think that going to Penticton, which has a good program, and he went with Tristan Amonte, and he played actually with a couple of other kids of NHLers. Scott Niedermayer's son is on the team as well. And, I know that he finished with 66 points in 46 games. So he had a good year offensively. He was always in the top 3 or 4 in scoring. He did miss a little bit of time due to injury, but he came back. And in the playoffs, he had 10 points in 5 games. 5 goals, 5 assists. So he did hit the 2 point per game mark in the postseason when it really counted, and he was really hitting his stride. And then the season gets canceled, and he was really looking like he was kind of turning a corner. He is going to be heading to Boston University next season, and so he's going back into the NCAA. Next year is going to be pivotal, I think, for Jay O'Brien. He is going to be making that move with Tristan Amonte. It's like they're attached at the hip. But next season, I think we'll really get a better picture of what Jay O'Brien's future is going to be like. I think it's a pivotal year for him, but certainly to give up on him is foolishness at this point.
I agree. And so that brings us to the next person, Mark Friedman. Now, I liked when he was called up in a couple of games there in a pinch, he was solid. You hardly called his name, and I guess that's what is a good thing when you're bringing somebody up from the AHL, especially later in the season when the games are on the line. And he was in the middle of that run. I think he had a great game against Boston, I do believe. So with that being said, what do you think his chances of breaking in and out here and there, being that 8th or 9th guy that they call up when they need him?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't overly impressed with them. I mean, it was only 6 games. I don't put too much stock in 6 games. He did get an assist, which is nice. But yeah, you're right, Chef. You really didn't notice him too much out there, which is a good thing. It shows you that he wasn't taking risks out there. He wasn't trying to push things that weren't there. He was reading plays well, and he was responsible. I think Friedman comes from he started playing at Bowling Green University, and then he's been with the Phantoms now for the better part of 3 seasons. 16 points, 26 points, and then this year had 18 points in only 45 games. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he's not a top 6 certainly right now with the way that things stand on the Flyers, but certainly if he's a guy, he would be a guy that would be called upon in case of injury. And you can't really have too many Mark Friedmans at the moment. You're not going to be looking for stellar offensive output from him. You're just looking for him to kind of lock things down and just be an overall just solid contributor out there. Make the little plays, don't get caught out of position, don't try to force things too much. Just support your defense partner, make sure that you're aware of offensive players in the zone, and just getting the pucks out of the zone nice and clean, and get off, get the next shift on. Really solid little player. I don't know what his future is going to be, but I believe they got to sign him. I think he's an RFA this year.
Oh, good. Well, at least they have somebody steady to I have a backup on is, I guess, the point I was alluding to. So that would be good.
I mean, Dan's probably seen Mark Friedman a lot because he goes to a lot of the Phantoms games.
Good segue. Dan, you're up.
Just my take on Mark Friedman. I mean, he was kind of the Phantoms' top guy this year, but that's kind of by default because their blue line was incredibly thin. I think he's a guy that's not necessarily going to do anything overly spectacular, but he's also not going to do a lot of things wrong. And I think we saw that in the short stint that he had in the NHL. You know, he was kind of invisible out there. And for a defenseman, that's a good thing. You know, you kind of want to forget that they're there most of the time. And I think that's what he is. I don't know if he's anything more than, you know, maybe a sixth guy, seventh, you know, just kind of guy that can call in for a couple games. I don't know if he's ever going to be a full-time NHLer, but from a Phantoms perspective, I really did like what he saw out of Friedman. I just don't know what his transition level is going to be to the NHL. But on that note, let's take it to Noah Cates. Wrapped up his second year at the Minnesota Duluth, former fifth-round pick by the Flyers in 2017. Kind of an under the radar, but seemingly very driven prospect in the Flyers organization.
Yeah, he's getting rave reviews. People really like his overall game, his commitment to playing a 200-foot game. They like his work ethic. I know that he was, a bottom six kind of player with the U.S. World Junior team a few years back, but he is a national champion at Minnesota Duluth. He's played there 2 years now. So his first season was 40 games, 23 points, 9 goals. Not a bad little freshman year. And then this past season in 34 games, he had 33 points. So he was basically a point per game guy. And he increased his goal total from 9 to 14 in 6 less games. He should be going back to Minnesota Duluth this coming season. I haven't heard anything about him going pro. His brother plays on the team, so I think that he's going to definitely take advantage to play with his brother while he can. I would think, though, that after this season, listen, he's already won a national title. I don't know why you would continue the NCAA college route when you can turn pro and start to bring some reinforcements to the Phantoms in their forward depth. I think that would be probably the ideal thing for Noah Cates. Finish out the season in college, turn pro, and away we go.
Speaking of reinforcements, Tanner Lazinski finally signing after wrapping up with Ohio State, a former sixth-round pick in 2016. Rumor has it that he may get a shot with the Flyers out of camp, but more than likely end up in Lehigh Valley for a little while. What should we expect out of him down with the Phantoms?
I would expect that he would actually start with the Phantoms. And I think it has more to do with the Flyers signing Linus Sandin a few weeks ago. If Sandin wasn't there, certainly I think Lazinski would have a better chance of making the Flyers, just because he spent 4 years at the Ohio State University, as the football players like to say. Right. So he did his 4 years. He's been a point per game player, even over a point per game in some seasons. He was in a leadership role on that team, and he's got the size. So he's built. His frame should be ready for the pro game. I just am not sure about if, the mental aspects and just the speed of the game, if he would adjust that quickly to the NHL right out the gate. He is 23, so size-wise, frame-wise, he should be good to go. He plays a 200-foot game, which, coaches love, especially in those bottom six spots. They love people who, can get up and down the ice, who are responsible defensively, don't shirk their defensive responsibilities, but can also move the puck and make plays in the offensive zone as well. I would think, though, that with Sandin signing, and of course, Robert Haig should get all the credit for, he's from the same hometown as Sandin, and look at him, he's a stud defenseman now, and he's got, a great head of hair. He's like a supermodel out there, and now he's an agent, for crying out loud. He's bringing talent over to the Flyers. But I would think that Sandin, he's on a 1 year ELC 925,000, I think. They are going to give Sandin every opportunity to be on this roster next year. And based on the year that he had in Sweden, just he was kind of around the net and just popping in lots of garbage goals and was just a constant threat and nuisance in that offensive zone. They will give Sandin the opportunity to make this team, and I think that means that Lisinski would probably spend a little bit in the AHL, especially to start.
Talk goaltender. Felix Sandstrom made the jump to North America this year, along with Karel Ustimenko. Both started in the ECHL and floundered out of the gate. Ustimenko found his footing long before Sandstrom did and made the jump to the AHL. Sandstrom kind of did. His numbers don't look great with Reading. .885 save percentage, .327 goals against. But after Ustimenko got called up and Sandstrom rather took the starting reins, he did seem to get much better with Reading. What do you think his chances are of playing in the AHL next year?
Oof. Listen, he did improve in the ECHL as the year went on, but I think Ustimenko kind of surprised everybody by outdueling Sandstrom. When Sandstrom came over, he had that great prospects game in the preseason against, I think it was the Islanders prospects, and he was making all kinds of saves, and he left the game halfway through the game, a scheduled pull with a 2-1 lead, and he made quite a few saves. He was the best player for the Flyers prospects that game, and then kind of floundered, especially the early going in Reading. It was always him and Hart. Sandstrom came over and Hart just took over and he's the guy in Philadelphia now. And I think Sandstrom's kind of got to find his game sooner rather than later here. With the turnover in Lehigh Valley, you've got a minimum of 3 new defensemen out of the 6 that are going to be starting every game now. That's a big turnover. And these are first-year guys in the AHL. They're going to get beat on a little bit, and it's going to be kind of a trial by fire. I don't know if having Sandstrom and Ustimenko in the AHL together would be the way to go. I don't know if that means Alex Lyon is the answer either, but I think that you would have to get a veteran presence there. And then once Sandstrom can definitely show that, yes, he is in fact AHL ready to platoon with Ustimenko and share that net in Lehigh Valley, then you can kind of dump the vet or make a trade or whatever. But I don't know if the Phantoms would be best served having 2 really young prospects in goal right now to start the season.
Well, if you're looking for somebody to stop pucks, Alex Lyon is most certainly not your guy. David Kasha got his feet wet with the Flyers this year. 6 games, did manage to score his first NHL goal. Down with the Phantoms otherwise, 51 games, 7 goals, 19 points. I really liked what I saw of him this year. Can you say the same?
Yeah, I mean, good work ethic. I know that he didn't have a long time here in the NHL, but it was kind of a nice story that he got to score his first ever goal with his brother on the ice, on the bench looking at him with his family in attendance, which is always a great thing. A 5th round pick. He had 23 points last season in Lehigh Valley, went down to 19 this year in 11 extra games. Overall, again, this is going to be a guy that you look forward to improve next year. He's a Czech player, so he's got to come over here and get adjusted to North America and everything else. And granted, he's been here 2 years already, but I think that with all the change undergoing on the Phantoms, I'd like to see a little bit more from him. I know a lot of the guys that follow the European players a lot, like Alex Appleyard, etc. They love David Kasha. They love players like that. They love Hogberg. I'd love to see what these guys can do with a little bit more seasoning and a little bit more help around them, because the Phantoms up front should be a little bit better and more consistent going forward this year.
And the other goaltender, we already talked about him a little bit. Krell Ustmenko succeeded with the ECHL Reading, came up, and then looked like a hot mess in the last 5 games for the AHL. At least what I saw of him anyway. I was not a big fan of his play. But again, it takes time. The fandoms are a goddamn disaster, and the players worth the crap were called up. So, he made the jump first. Obviously, he may have the upper hand on a AHL spot next year. What do you think?
Yeah, he probably does have the upper hand at the moment, but I don't think that it's a certainty that's going to stay there. Certainly everyone liked Sandstrom more in terms of when he was back in Europe playing, and I think it was a bit of a surprise. Ustmenko kind of took everybody by surprise here in North America with his season and how quickly he adjusted. He looked really good for Reading, and justified that jump with a .919 save percentage and a 19-4-5 record with 2 shutouts. And then, he got to the Phantoms in 5 games, 1-3-1 here at the end of the season. But, again, with 3 defensemen that are going to be brand new and they're going to be really green, and potentially 4, depending on, Wyatt Kalinick, if he decides to come to the Phantoms and sign his ELC, that defense core is going to be learning to play with each other. They're going to be making mistakes. They're going to be growing together, though. And that's a positive, but I don't think that having 2 really young goaltenders back there is going to be putting them particularly in a position to succeed. I think it's going to be putting a lot more pressure on them rather than relieving the pressure. And I think a veteran presence back there will probably be needed at the beginning of the season. And then depending on, Ustmenko, Sandstrom, what happens, that's when you kind of pull the trigger and make a decision, make a call.
And next up, Mason Millman, third year, the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL, 44 points in 13 games. Haven't heard much about this guy. Can you enlighten us here?
Yeah. Listen, he's a defense prospect that's kind of been in the news recently. I think Jordan Hall had a piece on him. I think it was yesterday or the day before, talking about how he's kind of a hidden gem. I'm not going to say he's not a hidden gem, but he's kind of a mystifying kind of player. He does skate well. He is physical. He can throw a hit. I think Brett Flair, the assistant GM of the Flyers, said it right when he basically said, I don't really know, Saginaw Spirit in the OHL are a run and gun hockey team, and it's hard to tell what Mason Millman is because he is essentially playing on one of the most dominant units in the OHL. I mean, he's got Cole Perfetti, who's going to be easily a top 10 selection this year. I think he's a top 5 player myself. That line of Perfetti, Koski, and Damien Giroux, they had 111 points, 80 points, 75 points. 37 goals, 34 goals, 44 goals. That line destroyed teams. I watched games where Saginaw was down 5-1 in the period, and they'd come back and win 6-5 in overtime. Just destruction, that line. And Millman essentially played with that top line a lot of the times. At the beginning of the season, he was kind of a wreck. I was wondering why the Flyers had even taken this guy, because a couple weeks into the season, probably about 5 weeks into the season, he was a -16 or a -17. He just looked kind of lost in the defensive zone, just letting guys skate around him, untouched, and just, tapping in pucks. And you sat there going like, what is this guy doing? And then to his credit, he really did turn his game around, and Saginaw, to their credit, also turned around their game. Basically, they were dominant going down the stretch in the OHL. And, again, how much of it was due to Mason Millman and how much of it was due to that top line? And I think that's what Brett Flair was basically talking about when he had his comments about Mason Millman. I want to see what he's going to do next year. If a guy like Cole Perfetti comes back into the OHL next year, we'll see what Saginaw does next year. I want to know
I want to know if it's more Millman or if it's more the top line. I would suspect highly that it was more the top line, and Mason Millman was kind of along for that ride. But to say that he's not a good prospect would not be true either. He's definitely somewhere in the middle. He's somebody that you can get excited about, but I wouldn't put too much stock and excitement in him. I think that there's other guys, like York, like Zamula, that would be ahead of him on the depth chart going forward. But is an intriguing little player, and he definitely has a little bit of a mean streak too. He got a 6-game suspension for trying to take somebody's head off with an elbow. So he wasn't successful, but the attempt was definitely there.
Yeah, if I could just chime in about Millman, I think that one of the intriguing things about him was that he was a younger player for his class. And at that stage of their careers, they can make progress at a pretty accelerated pace. So I think if you look at the skill set, the physical maturity, I think that's kind of fed into the narrative about him maybe being a sleeper in the 4th round or what have you. But
yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that too. That's why I'm kind of mystified with Millman. I don't know one way or another how I feel about him. He started off poorly. He definitely turned it around, and Saginaw was definitely an offensive team. I kind of give more credit to Cole Perfetti though, because people were kind of all over him. He only had like 12 goals at the beginning of the season, and he went into the World Junior selection camp for Canada, and the last day he was cut. And the reason why I liked him so much in the draft coming up is, Sports Center, the first story is, hey, Cole Perfetti didn't make Team Canada. And he had a crowd of reporters basically badgering him saying, how do you feel? How come you didn't make the team? And, you could tell he was upset and he didn't like it. And to his credit, he went back to Saginaw and he worked his tail off, and he finished with, 37 goals, 111 points. Not too shabby. That's pretty resilient for a young player.
Well, what about somebody that we should all have our eyes on right now, potentially Wyatt Kalynuk? Made his announcement that he wanted to turn pro, leaving the University of Wisconsin, a former 7th-round pick in 2017, although not signed with the Flyers yet. Do you think he signs with the organization?
I think he does. I don't see why he wouldn't. What would be the benefit to becoming a free agent? I don't think he's ready for the NHL right now. He certainly has good mobility. He's got good offensive instincts. He can quarterback a power play. He sounds a lot like a guy that we actually already have up here in Philadelphia, but it's kind of in turmoil right now, or certainly doesn't seem to have a place on the team right now. Really good at pinching and knowing when to kind of move forward in the offensive zone, but in the defensive zone, he can make some pretty questionable decisions. And I know that he's had some solid years in Wisconsin. He's in their leadership group on that team. They had a very disappointing season. They've got talent there like Cole Caulfield, Keandre Miller of the Rangers. They've got Alex Turcotte of the LA Kings. They've got some talented kids on that team, and they really weren't close to challenging for a national title like they thought they were going to be. I was kind of surprised that maybe he'd be tempted to go back and try for that national title. I know he is an older player. He's 23 right now. And because of when he was signed, he does have a clause where, he's got 30 days to sign that ELC or he can be a free agent. I really don't know which team he'd be able to go to that he can make an impact on. I mean, other than Detroit, who's a steaming hot mess at the moment, I don't see him making any NHL club right now. He'd be going to the AHL, and he'd be getting the same money contract-wise on his ELC as he would anywhere else. Don't really get why he would want to do that.
And last one here, he will be a Phantom next season for sure. Wyatt Wiley leaving Everett Silvertips. 14 goals, 64 points this season. I'm excited to watch him, former 5th-round pick in 2018. What is he going to bring to the Phantoms roster next year?
I just like his all-around game. Watched a lot of the Everett Silvertips this year. He doesn't really have, glaring deficiencies in his game. He's just, he's decent in all aspects of the game. He's a pretty good skater. He's good at chipping pucks out of his zone and kind of, beating other players in foot races, getting those puck retrievals, making that pass out of the zone. Really good on the power play. I wouldn't say he's elite level. He's certainly not at the level of like a Kalinuk, for example, but definitely a good power play guy. Really interested to see what Wiley can bring. He's one of the young rookies that's going to make their Phantoms debut this year. Definitely, I see a top 4 role for him. I just worry again about his size a little bit. He's certainly not small, but he's going to get challenged and beat up a little bit in his pro debut, and I think he can definitely handle being in the AHL with the Phantoms. I'm excited to see what he can bring too.
I like his hair. It's totally ridiculous.
I haven't seen that. I've got to check that out. One of the other players before we go and we wrap up for tonight, and Manny, just fantastic job giving us a wrap up at what the Flyers have. Linus Hogberg, they cut bait with David Bernhardt, and they decided they were only going to sign one of these Swedes. He was drafted in the 5th round in 2016, 6'1", 185. And, very efficient puck mover. Not a lot of fancy in his game. We talked about him with Russ Cohen. Russ seemed to think that he had a higher upside than Bernhardt, but Bernhardt might be a little bit more likely to play at a lower level in the league. I'm just curious, a brief take on Mr. Hogberg.
Yeah, I think efficient is definitely the word that you want to use. He's a good skater. I haven't seen much of him other than the stuff that's really come out recently. The guys that follow the European players really like him. The other guys that really like him are the analytics people. So I'm not really sure what to make of it. For me, the numbers offensively definitely are not really there, but keeping in mind he was definitely playing against seasoned vets over in Sweden at the top level. 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points in 50 games. He can move the puck. He can skate. I don't think he's got too much offense in his game. I don't think that he's got that high of an upside. But they obviously felt that they wanted him in the system just to kind of see what he would bring on the North American ice. And I think in comparison with Bernhardt, he definitely, from all accounts that I've seen, Hogberg was the best European defenseman that they had overseas in Europe. And they obviously decided to keep him and not let him kind of go the way of Bernhardt.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Alex Appleyard is one of his biggest champions, and Alex is now on trial with the hockey world in Philadelphia. He better make it now. But he's been a big fan. I think Dan Silver's a big fan of his too. So it'll be interesting. And these signings, these decisions, maybe Wyatt Kalinick just thinks, is there going to be room for me even in Lehigh Valley? And there's going to be a trickle down between, depending on decisions with guys like Justin Braun and Shane Gostisbehere, and does Mark Friedman now slot in as the 7th guy? Is Robert Haig now the 6th guy? And I think, there's a lot of dynamics at play that will determine where these guys are slotted. Very interesting going forward. But with that, gents, wow, very comprehensive. And Manny, I just wanted to thank you for coming on tonight. And where can people find you on Twitter and your work?
Definitely with Dan at brotherlypuck.com, and follow me on Twitter at Manny, Manny, Benevides, Benevides.
Fantastic. And we'll go around the horn here. Dan, since we just had your Brotherly Puck and Pod mate, why don't you tell us about what you got going on in the BP factory there?
Yeah, well, plenty of articles. If you've yet to see the Jack Eichel trade, be sure to read that, and then you can yell at me like everybody else has. And, at Brotherly Puck, at Brotherly_Pod, at Angry Negative, as well as at Dan the Flyer Fan.
Fantastic. Chef?
You can find me at Steam Pub. It keeps popping up. People keep saying, yes, I am a real chef. So, and I'm actually cooking through this whole madness here. So we're doing no contact pickup. You can get delivery. You can get whatever you want. And we're doing a full menu. We're probably going to be changing the menu during this whole thing. So when we go to regular seating, we're going to be really slick about it. When you won't have menus, you'll just be able to scan a bar on your table. That's a sticker that's there, and the menu comes up on your phone. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up soon, so you can find us at Steam Pub in Southampton, and you can find me on chef@steampub.com on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me at Chef de Left B on Twitter.
Fantastic. My personal account, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520 on Twitter. And, of course, follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. And please rate and subscribe if you subscribe to the O&B Puckcast on one of a multitude of platforms, especially Apple Podcasts. When you're looking for Flyers Podcast, it moves us up the charts and people can find us that much easier, the O&B Puckcast. Appreciate it. And, folks, until next time, everybody, take care.